Welcome to the 27th episode in the martial arts poetry series. In this video, we're going to be going over a Yang Style Taijiquan movement called draw the bow, or draw the bow to shoot the geese. So this movement's like so. There's a drawing action and then a wind up as you punch and strike behind you with the elbow. So the idea is, the imagery, right, is like we're drawing a bow, right? Literally like we're drawing a bow. So the idea of drawing a bow is talked about a lot in Chinese internal martial arts. So here we're physically like implicating that we're drawing a bow here, but what the implication of the principle is that we're drawing our body like the bow. So not only are we imagining that we're drawing a bow, but we are the bow. So what qualities does a bow have? What it has with issuing power? That's what we're going to look at with this principle. So when you have a bow, when it's at rest, right, when you're just holding it with one hand, there's no potential energy to shoot the arrow. It's only when drawn that the arrow has the potential energy to shoot once we release it. So whereas one might think of picking up a rock and throwing the rock as a sort of power that has less of a wind-up action, there's just, I push it outwards. This has this condensing, this pulling, this drawing action that then releases force. And that's what we get as the bows of the body and how we release force in, say, Fa Jin. And when I say like a winding up action, I don't mean like you're gonna wind up your punch or anything like that, but it has more to do with what's happening internally with this condensing contraction and then expansion and release. So it's a lot more minute than what one might assume by saying wind up action. So it's not like that. But the idea is that whenever you do any movement, there's a closing or an opening, right? So if I bring my arm towards myself, there's these obvious closings. This area closes, right? I have this closing and this contracting movement. And as I extend, this opens, and it reaches out. So that's an opening movement. The contract is the drawing of the bow, whereas the extend is the releasing of the arrow. We can think about it this way. So when I'm doing this movement, there's a movement prior where it's like I'm drawing the bow, so this is my closing action, and then as I do this movement, is actually my releasing of the arrow, despite what the implications of the posture might say, where here we're drawing the bow. What's actually happening in any movement, there's both openings and closings happening simultaneously. So there's closings here, like the most obvious closing, and as we move into this part here, right, I'm obviously releasing this previous close, but in doing so, I turn further, which creates a closing this way, which can then fire back. So really I have this close and then open, right? So I have this open that becomes a close, and then I can fire back. Of course, this extra movement is just extra, just to show you the idea of being able to release from that extra close. But we have this close, and then it's open, and then this close from the open from the other close. So what has to be kept in mind is this idea of Fa Jin is more like the releasing of an arrow. Think about it like this. If I twist my body, and then I shrink downwards, I sink my tailbone, and I really kind of shrink my space, there's this feeling of like this compressed spring. And when I get to that feeling, I feel really uncomfortable in this position. I'd rather maintain straight. So as I'm in this position and my body wants to maintain straight, it already wants to move this way, so I just release it. That's the kind of feeling of Fa Jin. It's like a sneeze. There's like this moment of like, your body's getting ready to sneeze, and then the actual releasing of the sneeze feels good, right? It feels good, you finally got it out. It's the same way with Fa Jin. So as I close, right, I'm closing, and then I have this uncomfortable feeling of this close, this condense, and then as I open, right, I feel this release, it feels good, and I have this close, and then I feel good because now I've released it. So it has a lot to do, very reverse of how we normally think about power, whereas chucking a rock, now we're coiling to uncoil, or condensing to release. So that's the idea with drawing the bow, is just trying to teach you about this overarching principle of fajin and release of force, about drawing the bows. Just to give a quick, before we end the episode here, the main bows of the body that we talk about, there's more in-depth ones, but for the beginners thinking about bow practice, the main one is along the spine. That's your first bow, your main bow. Then you have along the arms, that's a secondary bow. And then along your legs, that's a third bow. So all of these, think about them in this manner of contract, expand. So I think about the spine, right? I can contract by shrinking and then expanding by the release of that shrink, or I can twist and then I can release. Same with the legs, I can shrink and then I can expand, or I can twist and release. And same with the arms, right? I can contract, expand, I can twist, release. And once each individual bow is feeling good, you can use them all in tandem together, which is more appropriate for the art. So you can get into movements where we shrink, condense everything at once, and then expand all together, right? So in this one we have this obvious twisting, everything is shrinking, condensing, and then here we get this expanding, you get this expanding of the arm bow, expanding of the leg bow, but the torso bow expanded and then condensed again once it reached its limit, and now we can release again. So you can think about it as like when we draw from one bow and we release it, it can be drawn to the other side. So like if I do it with simple punches, right, I can shoot this way, I've turned my body this way, I want to maintain my body this way, this is the neutral position, right? So I can twist this way, and then this is kind of spring-loaded. In the same way I can punch this way, and now this is all twisted and I want to maintain my position because this will be the neutral position. So no matter which way you go, not only are you releasing, but you're also condensing again, and then you can come back. Because otherwise you can end up in a mistake where you end up overemphasizing close and expand to the point where everything has to be, I close, this is a defensive movement, and I expand with the offensive movement. When in reality, it's all happening less in a linear and singular way, but all happening together. So one open creates the contract, and one contract creates the open. So first practice, of course, with simple, close, expand, and then you can become more detailed over time. So that was Yang Style Taiji, draw the bow to shoot the geese. Thank you very much.